Hi! Welcome to this part of my review, featuring the When the Moon Hangs Low role-playing game. If you haven't seen the other parts of my review, featuring this Bloodborne inspired role-playing game, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time we are going to talk about factions and antagonists. There are several powerful factions that operate in Harrowmire, each with its own goals and plans for the city. Hunters often find themselves dragged into the machinations of these factions, whether they plan to or not. I am going to give you information on these factions, as well as talk a bit about the benefits of belonging to these groups. First, we have the Militia. The remains of the city militia still try to bring order to Harrowmire, despite being hopelessly underqualified. In current times, in the absence of any other real leadership, the common people of Harrowmire have turned to the militia for leadership and protection. Dressed in faded and tattered uniforms, the militia can be found patrolling the shambles, Old Town, and the docks in an attempt to keep the citizens who live there safe from the monsters and criminals that now haunt the streets. Using the influence of the militia, you can obtain rumors and even be deputized in order to act within the city with certain freedom. Then we have the Church of the Undergod. This is still a powerful and wealthy organization despite the fall of Harrowmire. Secure in their cathedral, the priests of the church want nothing more than to see the city returned to its glory days, and the money of those seeking the bitter sacrament flowing once more. While a rare sight in the lower parts of Harrowmire, agents of the church exercise impressive control over the new city, the cathedral, and the necropolis. In those areas, it is not uncommon to see patrols of white-robed, armored church wardens in their intimidating masks. The church can provide financial aid and even some artifacts for the player characters to employ. Then we have the Hand. It began as a group of Imperial agents sent to Harrowmire sometime before the Night of Madness to investigate the Church of the Undergod and its influence over the city. It is the Hand's ultimate goal to see Harrowmire returned to the Empire rather than remain in the control of the Church of the Undergod, with an unspoken implication that this would also include the dissolution of the Church once and for all. The Hand's power lies in the many secrets they know, rather than strength in numbers. The Hand often contracts hunters to investigate parts of the city in the hopes of discovering the cause of the plague, or sometimes to recover church artifacts for analysis. They can provide the means to blackmail or assassinate others. Then we have the Order of Saint Claudine. The Order of Saint Claudine are a monastic order who cared for the poor and downtrodden during the glory days of Harrowmire. Since the fall, they find themselves stretched to breaking point, trying to care for the sick and injured that now overflow their small hospitals. The Order wishes nothing more than to care for the bulk of the population of Harrowmire, those who have witnessed their loved ones die of plague or transform into hideous monsters. The hospitals of the Order are often surprisingly well stocked with medical supplies, considering how dire the situation in Harrowmire is. The Order often contracts hunters to cull monsters threatening the citizens of Harrowmire, or sometimes to retrieve caches of medicine or supplies lost in the city. Their influence can be useful to provide healing for both the body and the mind of the hunters. Before we move on to antagonists, let me give you a few more details about the wider empire. While most games in the When the Moon Hangs Low role-playing game focus on Harrowmire, some game masters might wish to start their stories before the characters arrive in the Cursed City, or even set their games elsewhere in the Empire. The Empire, referred to by some as the Sarpedian Empire, has existed for centuries and encompasses dozens of countries, territories, and colonies. Its influence spreads even further than its borders, affecting trade, technology, and society across the rest of the world, even to countries that consider it a rival. The Empire is a diverse and wealthy nation and is currently in the middle of an age of industrial revolution and discovery. The current ruler of the Empire is Her August Majesty Empress Bulfelmina Sarpedos III, Queen of Midland. The Empress has ruled for almost 30 years and has a reputation as a dedicated and strong-minded leader, but also for her ruthlessness towards the quarantine of Harrowmire and the Bittershore region. When it comes to the areas of the Empire, geographically and politically, the Empire is divided into 5 broad areas. The heartland of the Empire is called Midland, and the folk who live there are referred to as Midlanders. The imperial capital, Acromantos, is located in Midland, and because of that, the region is politically and economically powerful, even compared to the rest of the Empire. Northwatch is a land of tall mountains and beautiful alpine pastures. This is another section of the Empire, one of the 5 broad areas. The people who live here are often called Watchers and have a reputation for being hardy and aloof, but with an intense sense of loyalty to their friends. Then we have the Bittershore region, home to Harrowmire. It is well named. Separated from the rest of the Empire by the forbidding Iron Ridge Mountains, the region is cold and remote. It is not without reason the people who live here are known as Bitter Folk. Then we have the South Ridge, which lies to the south of Midland, encompassing huge prairies of rolling grasslands, fertile coastal statuaries, and numerous small islands located in the Starfall Sea. Then we have the west bounds of the Empire. They are known for the cold, steppe lands that make up much of its terrain, and the nomadic people that make their home there. There are other dark places, where the forces of darkness have cast a shadow deep enough to affect the real world, but none as large and concentrated as Harrowmire. Whispers of these places persist across the Empire, and some hunters might even find themselves drawn to them rather than the cursed city. Game masters who wish to explore such places are encouraged to use their imagination when creating these convergences of darkness. Now let's talk about antagonists. Hunters will come into contest with all manner of people and creatures in the course of fulfilling a contract. I am going to give you information on some of these antagonists without spoiling things, because I'm well aware that there are players and game masters watching this review. First we have the Church Warden. The hooded and armored Church Wardens are a common sight in the new city, if not the rest of Harrowmire. Grim and fanatical, the Wardens are sworn to protect the priests and the cathedral above all else. Then we have the Sorrowful. 1 in 10 people who contract the Sorrow Plague do not die, but instead become what are known as sorrowful. Driven by an inhuman rage, these poor wretches weep blood and shy away from bright light, only to emerge at night in packs and prowl the streets of Harrowmire. Then we have the Heifling. This is the common name for a dead body animated into a semblance of life by an adult corpse louse that has taken up residence within it. We also have Ghouls. No longer recognizable as previously human, Ghouls are pallid-skinned, long-limbed monsters. Rather than a human, covered in rangy muscle and lean leathery hide, these creatures skulk in the darkness of alleyways and sewers, waiting for night to fall before they emerge. We also have Shades. The dead have never rested easily in Harrowmire, as far back as anyone can remember. Since the discovery of the necropolis, the number of ghosts seen in the city has increased dramatically. The spirit of someone who died a particularly tragic or violent death will sometimes return as a shade, an insubstantial silhouette that saps the will of the living and feeds on suffering. We also have consumed hunters. Sometimes hunters fall to the various curses which plague them, becoming dangerous monsters. Many hunters see it as their solemn duty to track down and neutralize such tragic individuals before they do too much harm to the remaining citizens of Harrowmire. And these are just a few of the many enemies that you will encounter during your adventures. This concludes this part of the review. In the next part we are going to talk about random tables, the included scenario, and I'm going to give you my final thoughts on this role-playing game. I think that the factions are going to be a great source of adventure seeds and also support if you belong to those factions or if you are allied to a certain group. You are going to benefit from their levers, from their strings, the ways that they can pull the strings to obtain resources, aids, information that otherwise would be impossible to obtain, or at least not by conventional means. They will serve as allies and antagonists. And speaking of antagonists, this role-playing game contains a complete bestiary. The amount of creatures is satisfying, but the information is easy enough to modify, to create new creatures, variations, and to come up with your own monsters. Thank you for watching this part of the review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.